Hi, everyone. Today is a very, very special episode. I'm truly humbled and honored to have Sandip Ranjan here with us. It is very difficult to summarize such an illustrious career spanning over more than 40 years in a few minutes, but I will give it a try. After having done mechanical engineering from NIT Rourkela in 1978, he joined Usha International, part of Shriram Group, as a management trainee. He left Usha as a joint divisional manager in 1988 to join Al Fateh Motors, Dubai, as their franchisee head of Toyota cars and Hino trucks. He returned to India in 1994 and there began his truly exceptional career in telecommunications. He was the first employee of Hutch and was appointed the CEO of their paging business. He also ran their cellular mobile business from 1998. And by the time he left Hutch in 2006, it had 25 million subscribers and it was sold to Vodafone for $22 billion. He then took on another challenge to lead the largest telecom company of Malaysia, Maxis Berhad, as their CEO in 2007. Under his leadership, the company was relisted on Bursa in what was the largest Southeast Asia's IPO at that time. And he helped Maxis become the top 5 listed entities of Malaysia. Between 2007 and 2013, he was on the board of several telecom companies like Aircel India, Sri Lanka Telecom, Axis Indonesia, helping them grow and succeed. He also received several accolades in this time period and featured for 4 years in the top 100 most powerful global telecom persons in the Global Telecom magazine. He joined Reliance Jio Infocom as their managing director and CEO in 2013. He worked there till 2015 after calling it a quits and running the daily affairs of a company, but he is still contributing significantly to the success of several companies as a senior advisor and independent board director. He is currently an independent board director in Greenlam and Sterlite and a senior advisor in Analysis Mason. Wow, so this is truly remarkable. It's such
Thank you. Thank you very much for your very kind introduction. And I can see that you have researched quite thoroughly.
I did. I also know that you are very passionate about cricket and you are a Liverpool fan. Like
yes,
quite a bit of research.
I'm passionate about sport actually, but yes, Liverpool and cricket are my prime interests.
That's so awesome.
I became a Liverpudlian from the age of 6. So when a lot of people these days talk about Manchester United, Arsenal, and Chelsea, I said, look, during my young days, there was only Liverpool. That was the biggest club at that time.
Yep. So take us to your childhood. Where did you grow up? Your parents, your school, etc.
As you know, I am an Oriya boy, but I hardly lived in Orissa except for the brief stint that I had in my engineering college. So I was born in Cuttack in my ancestral home because I came from a family of doctors and lawyers. So we had our own little nursing home. So me and my father and my brother, we all were born in the same room. And delivered by my father's aunt, who was the leading gynecologist in the country at that time. Anyway, so I was born in Cuttack, but I never lived there. And because my father was a government servant in civil aviation, and wherever my dad was posted, we moved as a family. And so my first 1 or 2 years when I was an absolute toddler was in Calcutta, Kolkata, as we all know it. And then I moved to Hyderabad, where I sort of studied till primary school there. And then I moved over to Lucknow, which was a very enriching school period of mine. I graduated in Indian School Certificate in 1972, December. I appeared for it. I got my results in, those days it used to take 6 months to get results. Then I joined, in those days it was called REC Rourkela. Of course, now it's called NIT.
Yeah.
And I joined them at a very tender age of 15. I joined engineering college. Those days, I was a little young for my class. So I believe that even when I was in second year, I was the youngest student in college. So I graduated at the age of a little under 20, because those were the 5-year courses. And then I joined work almost immediately. Um, because my father was a salaried government official, he was a senior government official, but if you're an honest senior government official, your salary is low, and so we grew up in a very controlled environment at home. The only insurance for us was really academics, and we learned the values of money, and like I think many middle class homes do. We were very spiritual as a family. We had an immense thirst for knowledge, and my father oversaw that all the time, which is why very early, at a very young age, we developed a lot of interests. While he was very strict about our academics, he also insisted that we played sport. So we grew up to be hardy boys, and that's something that has stayed with me all my life. So that was my early days. So I have two younger siblings, so are brothers of mine, um, and one of my brothers, as you know, worked for American Express and then Citibank and lives in the United States. The another one, the youngest, lives across the street from me. Um, I lost my father a couple of years ago. Uh, my mother still lives here in Delhi. So that's pretty much us. I have my wife had a corporate career. She did her own business. She used to run a manpower firm. Um, she's a textile gold medalist from Bombay University. She taught at the university as a lecturer, then started her own recruitment firm, and was the first managing director of Kelly Services in India. And she was also a chapter chairperson of FICCI Ladies, the Federation of Chamber of Commerce. And then she raised two children. So I have a son who's in California. He's married. He and his wife live in Mountain View. And I have a daughter who also just completed her graduation from was postgraduate, so graduation from Columbia University, and she's in New York. She's single, and we live in Gurgaon.
That's so awesome, sir. So from a family of doctors and lawyers, and then your father being in government, how did you sort of make this decision of choosing engineering and going to NIT Rourkela? And then how did the choice of mechanical engineering happen?
Well, so it's very interesting. Actually, my father was one of the best engineers I've ever met in my life. He was an aeronautical engineer from the UK. He was educated early in UK, so till his dying day, he had a very clipped British accent. So he was very biased towards science and technology, and he was actually an engineer more than a technologist. So I wanted to be a doctor actually. So in class in standard 9, I had the option of choosing biology over maths. So I chose biology, and my father was very upset, and he said, "How can you combine life without doing work in mathematics?" So I used to keep quietly moving over to biology, and he used to pull me back to maths. So after having gone into the math stream, of course, I was very fond of, I was a good student, so I was very fond of physics, which led to my interest in mechanical engineering. And again, it was on the advice of my father, who said that, look, um, and I knew very little about uh, electronics and telecommunication at that time. There were the main branches used to be civil, electrical, and mechanical. Those are the three prime branches. Of course, now you've got computer science, cyber technology, and stuff like that. And in those days, telecommunication used to be offered as a subject in electrical. It was not a separate faculty for us in university. But I because of my love for physics and my father saying that, mechanical engineering will always be the real engineering where you actually machines working on the machine. So I went to it, and I actually loved mechanical engineering, to tell you the truth. It's another matter that I eventually did not land up in the shop floor or in manufacturing because while I understood all that, I was not inclined towards that. I was more gregarious, and so I went and got myself a marketing job. And I really loved brand and marketing. So even till today, I'm a big brand fanatic and marketing fanatic. And in my lifetime, I have launched a few good brands and nurtured them. So when I became a management trainee in the DCM group, in those days, it used to be considered one of the better management training programs, along with the Tata Administrative Service and the Hindustan Diva program. But it was a very evolved management training program, which was famously known as the DCM management training program. And it is actually, a lot of people talk about CEOs and all coming out of levers and stuff like that. But DCM management trainees have a rich legacy of very, very successful CEOs and entrepreneurs. Also, if somebody ever writes a story on them, you will find that it is a very rich legacy. So there, the training was very intense. It was almost like an on-the-job MBA program. We were rotated through all departments. I worked in HR, I worked in warehouses as a warehouse in charge for 10, 15 days. I was put on sales, marketing. In those days, there were no computers, so we used to sit and fill up ledger books in finance. So, I got indoctrinated into accounting and finance, etc. So, and that company had a very structured way of thinking. And we all learned to be extremely analytical. But the company also had a great rigor for governance and propriety and integrity. So those values stayed with me all my life. And more importantly, they had great attention to detail. And that's again, which stuck with me always. And people who have always worked with me knew that I had a lot of attention for detail. And so in the process, and we were rotated through various products. So we became multifunctional, multi-skilled. And when we ran a business, I ran my first division, I was young for my company. I was just about 26 when I ran an entire Northern Indian division. So there were 600 people reporting to me. And I had a great deal of veterans working for me. And it was a very rough passage of time where you had to lead people who have much more experience than you. But I grew up as a leader manager, and because of the extraordinary intensity with which you were put through various departments and programs, one had developed a knack of understanding virtually everything in all parts of the business, which helped later on when I became a chief executive of the company, that I could sit and have a discussion with any part of my company with a degree of comfort and knowledge. So that's what really happened, So that was my journey to mechanical engineering. And later on, of course, I moved on to, I sort of, after I left DCM, where I got posted in some very remote places, lots of adventure, learned how to ride a motorbike while on tour, and visited some very remote parts of the country, lived on very meager allowances, but toughened up as an executive, and really toughened up as an executive. And so there were no excuses in my book left after that, and which was very good, because I went through the school of hard knocks, as they say. Later on, I joined Toyota's largest franchise, which was Alphatame Group, and that was another lovely journey, because there are very few companies in the world at that time that had the kind of quality rigor of Toyota. And Toyota was the leading car manufacturer. They were again very organized, very structured. Lot of everything that you talk about. Almost everything that you talk about in Japanese industry, which the world has got to know, like just in time and Muna, Muri, Kanban system, everything originated from Toyota Motor Works. So they were They were the knowledge bank of the Japanese way of doing business, and the whole world learned from them. And I apprenticed there as a franchise manager, and I fell in love with cars. Automobile engineering was one of my subjects in my final year, and I just loved cars. And I thought that this was going to be my vocation. And I had a wonderful job where the requirement of my job was that every week I had to change my car because I was the marketing manager. So I got used to the smell of new leather in cars. So I used to drive brand new cars for 3 or 4 days and then take the next one, the next one. And so when all the leading models would come, like the Supra, the Celica, the Nexus, I drove all of them for as a part of my job. So I loved it. But more importantly, I learned from Toyota the basics of quality, the basics of advanced planning. Again, if Shriram was thorough and rigorous, Toyota was a couple of times more rigorous and thorough. They would decide 3 years in advance what kind of colors they were going to produce, what was going to be the kind of manufacturing details, what features were required, very thorough on research. So, Abhishek, this entire uh, process of my working was a great school of learning. I was very fortunate that I sat at the knees of companies that were were steeped in very solid principles of doing business. That explains the longevity of a company like Toyota, and I remember that their quality was so thorough that in the very hot temperatures of United Arab Emirates, where I used to work, you would find on the driveway from Dubai to Abu Dhabi, which was, I think, roughly about 140 kilometers, you would find on a hot summer day a debris of cars where air conditioners would have broken down, but not a single Toyota. And, every month shipments of 1,000 cars or some would come and arrive on the Dubai port. And you had to turn the key just once, and the car coming out of the ship would start. I mean, I have never had an instance where somebody told me that it's taken me 2 turns to start a car. So they have adequate amount of fuel on them to start. But look at the thoroughness of that quality. So that was a great learning.
Phoenix is very much like Dubai, and then Toyota cars work just as well in Phoenix, and then you will see many other cars breaking down even today. But the Toyotas and the Lexus, they are one of the most popular.
I was part. Sorry to interrupt you, but I was part of the team that launched Lexus worldwide, and that for me was very, very rewarding, in the sense that, sorry, can I just answer this call? It's my daughter calling from New York. 1 second.
Yes, sir.
Hello. So no, but so I was saying that I was part of the Lexus test team. So usually, what would happen is that Toyota would test their new models for cold weather conditions in Oslo, in Norway, and for hot weather conditions in Dubai. So you actually had to drive a car which didn't have a label. It was camouflaged so that nobody would know what it is. But there was a lot of talk already in the market about Toyota coming out with a fabulous car called Lexus. And the managing director of Toyota at that time was from the Toyota family, Shoichihiro Toyota. And he said, build the Lexus as if you're building an automobile all over again, which means throw out all the preconceived notions or predispositions you have about automobiles, challenge everything. Now, for example, in mechanical engineering, we would have a chapter on vibration, and then it would be followed by a detailed machine design problem on dampening. And he said, why are you looking at creating dampeners for engine vibration? Why don't you remove vibration from the source? you had an axle and a propeller shaft which used to come out of the gearbox and then get fitted at the back, and there would be two lines of motion. And he said, why can't you take it directly from the engine? So what I'm trying to say is that they challenged every bit of engineering, and that in itself was a learning to say that, if you want to move forward and remain contemporary, you have to keep the cannibal in the family instead of a competition coming and doing what they did. You had to destroy your own model, and look at what you're doing. And so I drove. There was a pressure from the American market to launch Lexus in America because Toyota cars were getting a bit of a beating from the Honda Accord.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point of time they introduced this car, and so because of the pressure of the American market, I think it was launched in America in 1990 February or something, and it was supposed to be an owner-driven car at that time. And we launched the first car, which was LS300 and LS450. So I had the honor of driving the Lexus test car in 1988, 2 years before the world saw it. So I'd always keep telling my children, I said, maybe I was the first Indian to drive a Lexus ever. But on the Yokohama test tracks, banking it. So that was a great experience. And I saw the process of Toyota building the car, and they started with saying the relentless pursuit of perfection. And they stripped 600 marquee cars from BMWs to Lamborghinis to Maseratis to whatever, Porsches, and just to see what these cars are all about. So the only thing that Lexus lacked when it was launched was that it did not have the legacy and reputation of the so-called marquee cars. But otherwise, like for like, it was in engineering terms vastly superior to any model in its category.
Yep.
So every bit of that was a learning. I learned so much, and people tend to think that the Americans and the Australians are great marketing people, but they underestimate the Japanese.
Yes. But they have, been known for their quality, right? And then you touched upon so many things, sir, and I answered many questions that I was planning to ask already. But I do have a couple of follow-up questions. One around, you did mention that your later career was in telecommunications. Do you now think that, say, an electrical or electronics degree would have helped you better, or it does not matter? Only if you're really having a career in a very specialized, say, research field, the branch actually matters. But generally speaking, it does not matter that much. That's one. And second thing is, you did mention about getting a job in Usha. And sorry, sir, I wasn't aware of their management program. Everyone knows about TAS, right? But Usha, it's a revelation for me. Was that the reason that you did not go for MBA immediately after?
I did not go for my. I'll answer your questions in reverse. I did not go for my MBA at that time because, frankly, it would have been too much for my father to afford it, and I was not earning enough. So I remember that my father, when I got a starting salary of 1,200 rupees a month, my father very proudly wrote to everybody in the family saying, Sandip's got a 4-figure salary. Because in those days, even though he was a director in the government service, I think his salary was somewhere around 550 rupees or 650 rupees. But you're talking of the 70s, which was many, many years ago. At that time, rice used to cost a rupee a kilo. So, it was not so bad in purchasing parity terms. So, when so I didn't do that. Then my younger brother, who was just out of college, got into IIM Ahmedabad, and so it was important that we funded his study, and there were some contributions from me as well. So I waited for him to complete his MBA, and then I did my MBA from FMS Delhi.
Yes.
So it was
Sorry to
more
interrupt. So
because of,
you were already a CEO and
no,
COO
no,
back then, right?
no, I was not a CEO at that. No, I was at that time. I was a manager. I went much later at the age of 57 to Harvard Business School, but
Yes.
that was for an advanced management program for which you have to be a CEO. But this FMS was when I was about 26, so I was doing that course. So anyway, so going back to your question, I actually, you know, think very highly of the way my father had thought and put me in mechanical engineering because, telecommunication was something that I drifted into um, by sheer coincidence. It was not my intended career choice. So, on hindsight, I don't want to appear very intelligent and said I made the choice and I found an emerging industry. None of that. And I'll tell you how I got into it. But I think today, by virtue of having been a management trainee in DCM, done various products, being a mechanical engineer, having an engineering bent of mind, having understood markets, brands, etc., um, I feel I can run a hospital, I can run an airline, I can run any kind of company um, because of the width in which one has dealt with, and the thoroughness with which you look at a product or a service that you sell. So if you continue to be, broadly in most businesses, and I would sort of put my neck on the line and say that 70 to 80% of the fundamentals of doing business are similar. The little layer that is different is where you need to understand a little more with intensity about how that particular market or service works. Like I can't profess today that I know credit card business very well or banking business very well, but I'm sure I know how to run an institution, develop talent, understand the business, quickly pick up what are the key aspects of the market, what are our product strengths, what are our service strengths, how we should position ourselves, how should you run the finances, how should you execute. Now, these are things that run across businesses. And therefore, in that respect, mechanical engineering was the right choice because and I'm not showing any bias towards any particular engineering, but I'm saying mechanical engineering is the foundational engineering for most manufacturing processes.
Yeah.
And if you're comfortable with that, then layering it on top is not a problem. So I worked for virtually 24 years in the telecommunication business and held an extremely senior position for many, many years. I doubt if anybody said I sort of fell short of understanding what telecommunication means. So I know of many people who are running telecom businesses and they're not even engineers. Forget being in that particular stream. So I think we often, as engineers, we keep saying this, that, engineering makes us structured, it makes us analytical, but more importantly, in fact, engineers do very well in banking businesses and all that kind of stuff because they are very structured in their thinking. They get finance like that. And the fact is, it makes you curious. It takes away the fear of dealing with a machine and machinery. A lot of people have a technology block.
Yep.
And that's removed. A lot of people, for example, I know a lot of engineers who have a finance block, who find when they talk about finance, they have a block. But engineering does teach you to go into the depths of things, be structured, be analytical. And if you're by nature curious, analytical, and structured, you will do well in most businesses, most areas of life. Not even work, in most areas of life, you'll do well.
Yep. I totally.
Did I answer everything that you asked?
I think you did. I think you did, sir. How did the Hutch thing
happen? Okay, I was actually in Dubai, and I was actually getting very comfortable because I was doing well in Toyota. As I told you, I was driving brand new cars. I had the largest marketing expense account in the city, so I was an important guy for everybody. I also sponsored I had the India Australia series over there, and I had the opportunity of presenting Imran Khan with the Cressida car, Toyota Cressida car, and then
Was that the
Imran.
same? Was that in Sharjah, and was it the
Yes,
same?
yes,
The
and
2 centuries that.
yeah. No. So Sachin century came later in the Australasia series, which they call the Desert Storm, but that happened in the semi-finals and finals. But this was before that. It was the Australasia Cup, and he actually drove around the stadium, and I sat in the car with him. So that was in those days. But so I was happy in what I was doing. But you know, Dubai is not as large a market and diverse as India is. It's actually in those days it was a, if I may, I don't want to use this phrase badly. I don't want to demean it, but it was just basically a one-horse town. You even struggled to find a good bookshop in those days. You wouldn't be able to even buy a book, business book. Very smallish. So Aniljeet Singh, who was the son of the late Bhai Mohan Singh, the founder of Ranbaxy, he used to run the Max Group, and he was passing through Dubai and with another colleague of his and they said to me that, it's 1991, Narasimha Rao has opened up the market, India is becoming liberalized, the license Raj is coming to an end, India is a very different India from where you left it, and this is a good time for you to come back. And we have something for you. You'll be very surprised. Without even knowing what was in store for me, I came back. And it was because I was feeling very intellectually restless in Dubai. I was comfortable financially, I was fine, all those things were fine, but it was a good life. But I was feeling intellectually restless, and I was in my 30s at that time. So I left them and I came, and they parked me for a year in a electrodes business, which was it was not a very large business, but I was general manager of that business, and we were selling Motorola semiconductors, which was completely different from what I was doing. And then one fine day, I was told that they were battling in court for a telecom license, which they had won. And they gave me the license one afternoon and said to me that, look, we want you to run the paging business for us and start. This is the license. So I had no clue of what paging was, what telecommunication was. And then I was told that I have to meet somebody from a company called Hutchison Telecom, and he was the managing director globally. And he said he liked your resume because you've had a very strong consumer durable background, and he doesn't want anybody from pure technology background or telecommunication background. And in those days, because there was no private telephony in India except for the government service, there was hardly any reservoir of people available in private telephony. All the telephony that was done by BSNL and by the signals in the army.
Yep.
So I flew the next day itself to Thailand. I went to a company called Shinawatra, and I learned the basics of paging. And I remember on the third day, I was taken to Hutchison, and I was put up in this extraordinarily wonderful hotel in the middle of Hong Kong. And in the morning after I checked in, one lady knocked on my door, and she was in a uniform, and she came and said, Mr. Das, this is your cellular phone. And I was so excited. I said, my God, I can. So I went onto the street and I called my mom and dad and I said, guess what? I'm calling you from the street.
So you have written about it. I've read that in one.
So that was the initiation I had into telecom. And then, although I started the telecom business in Bangalore. I was headquartered in Bangalore. I perhaps set up India's first call center because there was no concept of call centers at that time. But for paging, you needed a call center.
Yep.
So we set up a call center. We set up a a business distribution, because there was no distribution of telecommunication. In those days, either you got it or you stood in a queue, I remember that I have often written in an article that when a girl in India was 15 or 16 years old, um, uh, her father would book two things for her wedding. One was a gas connection, and the other was a telephone connection. So, it was those kind of days. So a lot of things. As a pioneering CEO, I had to go and work with various agencies like the Wireless Planning Cell, understand how to get government clearances. The DOT was not familiar with sharing some of their infrastructure with private operators. It was new for them. And it was, those are very, very, there were days that, for an approval for a single tower, you had to go to 14 agencies to get a clearance for one tower. Now, of course, we build a tower every second. And in those days, you had to go to All India Radio, to the Army, to the Navy, to the Air Force, to Equisat, All India Radio. It was just 14 agencies had to give you a clearance for a spectrum band. So I worked with a lot of people in Motorola in those days, and we worked on creating a spectrum policy for allocation of spectrum. And it was known as, in those days, as SACFA, Standing Action Committee for Clearances, so for approvals for wireless. So a lot of pioneering work had to be done. Then I joined the cellular business, and I also had the misfortune of having to close down the paging business, which I had started, because paging and cellular arrived in India almost at the same time, and which actually sounded the death knell for paging. Because in other countries, paging had preceded cellular. So then we set up the whole cellular business. That's how I got into it. And then at some point, Max Group sold off its stake to Hutchison. And in those days, it was important for us to have a local partner. So then SR stepped in, and it became Hutchison SR for a long time.
Yep.
And that's how, and then slowly we grew from Bombay City to national business. And it was a great journey.
So getting a top job in one of the emerging industries is one thing, but really putting your company on top against all the competition and against all the odds that an emerging industry faces, that's another thing, right? So there are many emerging industry at this point in time, and as people like us think about switching to some of those, and then let's say we land into one of the top positions, it's just the start of the battle, right? We still have to sort of work really, really hard to make our company succeed, because there will be many other players. So how do you do that? I mean, can you give some insight into?
So, all through my interview with you today, I have been talking about my background experiences. Let me tell you one more thing. If you, in a place like Dubai, if somebody walked into your Toyota showroom, you had to sell him a car. Because if he walked out, he'll go across the street and buy a Honda.
Yep.
So one of my salespeople, he was an Egyptian guy, he says, what I do when a customer comes with his old car and drops his key on the table, I hide that key so that he can't leave without me selling him the car. I mean, it was just he was paraphrasing.
Yep.
I don't think he really did that, but he was paraphrasing the intensity of competition. So one grew up on that kind of competitiveness. So at all points of time, when competition is surrounding you like hawks, you've got to be very aggressive. You've got to be a step ahead. Like, if I remember in telecommunication, if one of our competitors was going to launch something on a Monday, on Saturday evening, we would know completely what was going to be done. You had to do your own research and find things, etc. And overnight on the weekend, you'd be ready with a product so that when he or she launches it at 9 o'clock in the morning, at 10:30, you had a superior product launched in the market. That was the kind of intensity. But many lessons were not lost on me, which I implemented. I never was mentored by somebody in a company saying, okay, now you become COO, you're vice president, then you're CEO. I became a CEO at the age of 35. So in a way, I was thrown into the deep end of the pool, but I had I had very, very sound grounding in business. So it was not difficult for me to understand some things. Plus, the qualities of good branding, the qualities of quality, the fanaticism that I had with customer service, the thing that I had about building. Somebody told me very early in my business that when you hire people for customer service, you should hire nice people. So some of these things got ingrained in my mind, and therefore, when you go back to your question about emerging businesses, this is what I was telling you. There is a basic layer
Yeah.
in business that is quality, execution, timeliness, developing the right kind of people, creating the right culture all the time. When we launched Orange, I used to make speeches in my company, and I said that when I cut up somebody who's from our team, he or she should bleed orange, not red. So that is the kind of cultural ethos. So I spent enormous amounts of time explaining to people the values of the brand, the values of our culture. So, processes and systems, Abhishek, can take you only that far.
Yep.
At the end of it, you're in an American Express, when you look at service businesses, at the end of it, no matter how good your processes are, I often use this term so people laugh at me that I'm saying operation successful, but patient died. So you can have the best of processes, but the person, your weakest link is the individual who's dealing with it. And if that person is deeply steeped in your culture and purpose, uh, any drawbacks or faults or any inhibitions that you may have in your systems and processes, which is not helping a customer, he or she will overcome it. I have never sacked a person in my life who did something for the customer which was not in our books. So that's important. But if you can't tell a customer, I'm sorry, I can't do this because it is company policy. You cannot forget that your business in the first place was for the customer. That's
Yep.
why you started a company. You can't, the customer is not interested in your policy. He wants to understand that you solved his business. The second thing, which I keep saying all often, is when you do these kind of new emerging businesses, it's very important to understand what business you're really in and what problem you're trying to solve. So I used to ask people this trick question in my company, and I'd say, okay, how many people in this room are from customer service? And all the customer service people will raise their hands. So I'd ask them, I said, what are all the other people here?
All of us. Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
You have customer weeks. What are all the other weeks in the company? Do you harass and torture customers? So these are all very fundamental. The other thing is, I used to often ask people, what business do you think we are in? Everybody will say, sir, we are in the mobile business. I said, no. You're connecting people. You are as good as your last call. You might have had 15 great calls, but the last call, he or she didn't get coverage. And as a result of which her small child was left stranded in school. I said, that's where your service did not deliver.
Yeah.
You could have had a great stay in hotels for years and years and years. It's like your American Express card. I could have had 3 years of meritorious service that one particular day my card didn't work. And I was stranded in the middle of an airport where somebody said, pay your excess baggage. And my card didn't work.
Yep.
You're as weak as your weakest link. So therefore, these fundamentals don't change in any business. You have to understand, why are you there for? What are you trying to do? Because if you understand that, you will continue to do work, research, to make sure that at all points of time you're getting closer and closer to what is your desired intent of the business. Otherwise, you will leave gaps in your business, which competition will get into.
Yeah.
So you look at telecom business. You know, I'll take another example. When, if in 2007, a gentleman called Mr. Steve Jobs had come to me and said, you know what, I'm going to launch a mobile phone, I would have put him in a lunatic asylum. I said, you want to produce phones? There's Nokia, there's Motorola, there is, the world has got phones. Why would you want to get into phones? But he got in because he knew that the phones were not doing everything that they intended to do. And the Nokias and the Motorola's of the world were sitting on their haunches, doing incremental improvements to their product and trying to preserve their cost. And they were forgetting what the customer needed.
Yeah.
So what did he do? He walked up to the drawing board, he drew a rectangle and he said, guys, this is my internet device. So the people said, how large is your screen? He said, the whole thing is a screen. And somebody turned around and said, where are the buttons? He says, you figure that out. So then you started touch buttons. So what I'm trying to say is that this is where businesses grow. Like, for example, today, anybody who thinks that he's in the petrol business doesn't understand that he or she is in the energy business.
Yep.
Somebody is looking for a fuel substitute.
Yep.
Today, because of high cost of fuel, why is it that electric vehicles were not first done by petrol companies or petrol car companies? Why did it come from other companies? It's because they thought they were in the petrol car and diesel car business.
Yep. Yep.
So somebody else said, no, this is becoming expensive. I will find it. Now, I was telling somebody the other day, I said, suppose you're driving a petrol car on a long distance. What is it that you carry in the boot of your car? You carry a fuel can. You carry a fuel can because you feel that if your car gets stranded on the way, you can take the fuel can to the petrol station and put in some basic fuel, or you carry one fuel as extra. I said, what is the fuel can for an electric operated vehicle? It's a battery pack.
Yep.
So you have to start thinking, and then say, oh my God, yes, that's what the product is. I'll give them a quick charge so that I can reach the next charging station.
Exactly.
So, innovation, thinking about your product, thinking deeply about customer conveniences, those things, Abhishek, never go away. So when you talk about an emerging business, when you take punts into an emerging business, you're also thinking deeply about predicting the future. So, many companies, they draw business plans. They will draw the existing business plan and say, okay, 5% growth, so much, 10% growth, so much, 11% growth, so much, etc., etc., etc. I give this example all the time that suppose I am Microsoft and I have got let's say, a theoretical 60% share of the operating systems. And I'm having a debate that in 2025, what should be my target? So somebody will say, okay, let's look at the management will be lowballing the figure and saying, let's look at 65%. The board will be saying, no, let's do 75%. But who's asking the question whether in 2025 there will be something called operating system?
Yep. Yep.
So you understand that? So my point is, if you start that kind of innovative thinking and you're constantly challenging your own model, which is why I use the phrase, keep the cannibal in the family,
Exactly.
that you will always stay ahead. And then when you're looking at future businesses, electric vehicles, again, cannot think that they're in the electric vehicle business. They're in the business of transportation. A time will come in the future where people will probably not own vehicles, but they will own rides. So in
Yep.
your pocket, you'll have 50 rides. You can go on a Mercedes, you can go on a train, you can go on a bus, because you don't need to own a vehicle, maintain a vehicle, find a parking space, park it somewhere, hop into something. You know, people from very affluent, the affluent strata of society in advanced nations, in metropolitans, use the metros.
Yep.
In India, it's considered to be down market. But that's also because, A, there isn't enough infrastructure. I mean, I remember my brother used to live a lovely home outside of New York in Connecticut. He would drive up in his car to the nearest railway station and then take a train into New York and get off at Grand Central. And he was a top executive, and he would say on the in the train, he would see a number of executives sitting there having their typical American coffee in one hand, the Wall Street Journal in the other hand, and they were all in suits. You can't find that in India because there is no infrastructure. So people will in the future buy rights. So therefore, coming back to your question, you cannot forget the fundamentals of what you're doing, why you're doing it, what problem are you solving. And every problem that you see in your life every day is a business proposition.
Yep.
Solving it is a business proposition. And, you know, like they say, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. All businesses are curveballs, and you keep straightening the line till you've reached the perfect line.
Yep. That's so profound. That's so profound. So is there one industry that you're very bullish about, one emerging industry that you think has huge potential?
You know, I can't think of one by itself, but there are many actually. And I think, what has happened is that, you people are very young. I wish I was 20 years younger and been at this age where, look at what has happened in the world. The high power of computation in miniaturized objects.
Yep.
A single chip today is more powerful than ENIAC, which went into several floors. So miniaturization, immense amount of computerization in that small little space, which is getting smaller and smaller actually, and wireless with bandwidths is today collapsing the world. These and then now you've added to that is the artificial intelligence layer, where if you look at our mechanical engineering studies, when engineering started, people used to look at how to deal with breakdowns. Then people moved to preventive maintenance. Then they moved to predictive maintenance, saying that, everything is fine, but in year 2000 and such, this is what's going to happen because that's what my tools and analytics are telling me. So therefore, when you apply these principles of miniaturization, digitization, analytical data, artificial intelligence, and you start layering them together, look at the power, and eventually with your networks, etc., you will have IoT and stuff like that. So remote control, you can do so many things. So that will affect several businesses. So say a single business will do well, and therefore let me go and find the next. Telecommunication business will change in shape and size in the next decade. I mean, look at where it was during the time of Graham Bell when he made his first call versus where it is today. And the lines are blurring, right, between businesses. Today, basically a computer company like Apple is producing terminal devices that are actually an Apple is more of an internet device than a phone. And everything will become dependent on networks. So networks are talking to networks. So we have stopped using the word mobile phones. Now we are calling it terminal devices
Yep.
because that chip could be on your door, it could be on your fridge. It's not a phone. However, still, by the time you have walked through the corridor, somebody has got your health analysis. He's already done a predictive thing saying, look, you're okay at 60. I'm 64, so you're okay at 64. But listen, looking at your aging process, and I haven't done anything. I just walked through a corridor.
Yep.
So
Yep.
actually, I'm not skirting your answer as to which business will do well, and I'm not trying to be Nostradamus, but I'm saying that the confluence
Nice.
of various technologies. So therefore, which business will do well is stuck in our imagination only. Now, we talked about people not owning cars but having rights. Um, Today, you're seeing the emergence, the decline of brick and mortar into online businesses. You are seeing that a company like Airbnb may be growing faster than many hotel businesses. Because they have changed the concept of what is a hotel. Uber has changed the concept of transportation. There are several examples like that in all businesses, and somebody's going to change it even more. So I think when you look at all these things, but I think the most important thing, I say this, and I don't say this spiritually, but the biggest challenge for all of us will be how to remain human. That will be the biggest challenge because technology is making everything so robotic, so analytical. People are getting afraid now. Also, when we were younger, technology took its own time to come. So we got immersed into technology. Like I remember when radios became transistors, it was easy to understand. But today, the way technology is moving, the human beings are unable to comprehend the pace of technology. There's a lag.
Yep.
But where things are getting easier is that the usage is getting so human-like. Like, for example, if I've got a phone and I want to make a photo larger, I'm using my finger like this. It's a human action. But I don't need to understand the technology that has gone into it.
Yep. Yep.
If I want to move a picture, I move it with my finger. So these are human actions. So as more and more products start getting human, you will start cloning human actions. But behind that would be extraordinary technology.
Yep.
Like if I'm talking to you, before even I've talked to you, I will know your background completely. I will know what you like, what you don't like. Maybe at some point I'll know what you're thinking. So I'm just saying that it's I cannot even think about what technology will do. But I think again and again, you will keep being drawn back to the concept of being human.
So there is a company that Elon Musk is funding, right? Which is into sort of designing these chips that can be put into your brain and it can capture all those signals. There will be AI to sort of make meaning out of it. So there is already
I
work.
remember there was a about 10, 12 years ago, there was an Indian guy called Pranay or Pranav. I don't know. He was in MIT. I remember one of his TED Talks where he spoke about this in great elaborate terms. And he spoke about it. He had actually experimented and worked on it. So
Yes.
you might want to. I don't know if you remember this guy, but I can't remember his name fully. But I think it was Pranay or Pranav. I think he had a Gujarati surname, but he was just brilliant.
And so you mentioned about IoT and that whole idea. I've also interviewed a friend of mine. She is actually a CTO and a co-founder of one of the startups. And they are trying to bring the factory to your phone. So they have all these IoT installed that can really capture all those signals about how the machines are performing in a factory, how the inventory is looking like, and all of that, get processed through AI. And it's all available on your smartphone to kind of then make decisions around, to know about how your factory is doing and where things may break down. You talked about predictive sort of analysis around what may break down in future, right? So it's very cool to see some of these startups coming in, and you're very right that the technology, several of the technology is converging to create something very exciting. And
See, let me go back to what your friend is doing. And when she talks about you call those things smartphones, but I would change it and say smart devices, because all the data need not necessarily appear on your phone. The reason it appears on your phone is because your phone is like your sixth sense. You carry it with you all the time.
yep,
And because you carry it with you all the time, that smart device is not on your watch or on your specs, but it is on your phone, because the phone does multiple things.
yep,
I remember a couple of years back, somebody was doing a TED talk, and he said that um, if you draw a big circle, it shows all the things that we possess in our life. If you draw a smaller circle, it says this is what we actually use. And if you draw a tiny circle, it says that this is what we actually need. And that can include three things: your wallet, your key to your house, and your phone. And that person said at the end, your phone can do the other two things also. So therefore, the phone is. But let me talk about something else. I'm saying, look at the impact that technology will have. See, all of these people who are doing startups are doing single-minded products and bringing AI and all that and improving things. But with all these changes happening, Abhishek, there is also the change in the social fabric. The change in the social fabric is the fact that look at why is it that we are not able to find medical help in small cities of India or villages? Is because when a young guy graduates and he builds a family, he finds it difficult to go and live in a village. He also finds it difficult for his children to be educated there or raising a family. Today, with connectivity, he can actually do remote surgery. So now the village can receive a Harvard professor teaching economics in America. At the same time, conversations can happen across the world. So you can have global classrooms, global exchange of knowledge, medical help provided remotely. And in some cases, people may move to the village saying, I can't afford homes in a city, so I will stay in the outskirts of the city in a beautiful home where children can kick a ball around. But my children will get the best education sitting there.
yep,
And I will get the best medical help sitting there. And whatever item I need for my life in terms of luxury, I'll get through Amazons of the world over there, because you have a highly developed supply chain system. So look at the change in the social fabric. You may move. I'm talking a bit like a futurologist, and I'm saying the migration from the villages into the city may become reverse again.
yep,
So all these things that your friends are doing are tiny bits, but look at the cumulative effect of what's going to happen.
yep, yep. Absolutely, absolutely. So what advice would you give to, say, the next cadre of corporate leaders?
Well, I think they need to be in touch with their basic human side, because technology can seduce you into thinking that everything is technical. But you should remain in touch with your human side, because remember that the human side will always remain superior, because we are dealing with humans, not robots. Second thing I would tell them is that paradoxical to what I said first, which is the fact is that no CEO of any business can stay away from the digital and technology world. They need to understand it. I'm not saying they need to understand how things work, but they need to understand how to harness technology. Because today that's available to them. And they must not forget the ultimate goals. Therefore, the curiosity for technology has to. So, you know, you cannot have technology dinosaurs anymore because, like I keep saying all the time, that in the future there'll be two kinds of companies: those that are quick and those that are dead. So, how will you be quick? And how will you be agile? And how will you be fast? Is because you've got to understand the technology. The CEOs of companies and CEOs of startups have to understand that they have to nurture the tech groups. They have to understand that tech groups are no longer subservient to business. They are the business.
Yeah. Yeah.
And startups must find a suitable time and place to step off and allow technology to take over, because they will start limiting their business with their knowledge. But they have to keep their finger on the pulse to see that the objective of the business, where it wants to go, is never lost, because technology people also get seduced with their own technology. What is the point of like I said, operation success? What's the point of a consistent flow of R&D which doesn't benefit the customer?
Yep. Yep.
So people spend a lot of money. 1 second, sorry, I'll have to switch it off. Just give me a second.
Yes.
Yeah.
So somewhere you also mentioned about battling gender biases, and there are other biases as well towards underrepresented minority. Can you talk about the importance of that as leaders?
Oh, look, there is no debate in the matter. When you talk about meritocracy, there are two things to this. First is the meritocracy, which means that you cannot be predisposed towards gender, age, rank, race. You have to make sure that at all points of time you're valuing merits and meritocracy. So therefore, biases go away. Now, the fact is that at this point of time, we are talking about this subject because there is an enormous amount of imbalance. So therefore, when there is an imbalance, you have to provide some degree of extraordinary support to the underprivileged groups of people. And that is why an effort is required in that regard. And a conscious effort is required. Because, the world for years has lost the opportunity of a very powerful workforce because of these biases. And almost 50 to 60% of the workforce of the world is not being utilized because of these biases.
That's true.
So that's the great opportunity. But things are changing rapidly. And again, there will be social turmoil because on the way in which people are brought up. I mean, just yesterday, my wife put up a birthday wish to my daughter. And she was saying that when my daughter was born in the hospital, my father was distributing, so happy, he was distributing sweets in the lounge. And an old lady asked him, बड़े खुश नजर आ रहे हैं, लड़का हुआ है क्या? And my father turned around and said, नहीं, घर में लक्ष्मी आई है. Now, this is a lady.
Exactly. Yeah.
So those days have changed a lot, but still they exist in many parts, in predisposition. Then a person's background, whether a person can speak good English or not, all these things have to be thrown out of the window. And you have to encourage that to happen. Because some of the finest ideas have nothing to do with age, race, gender, etc. Nothing.
Yep.
And I am a firm believer in that, and I think in the limited period of time that I was in service, and I sort of made sure at all points of time that I never had any of these biases. It's another matter that I might have had a smaller pool of people to hire from. But I think that pool has enlarged a lot, and it's delightful to see what's happening today. Is it enough? No, uh, but it is getting there. And in the end, meritocracy is going to be the key.
Yeah, yeah. So one last question I have, given your uh, fondness for cricket, and then I have a series of questions. You can choose which one you want to answer, and you have to make some predictions because these haven't happened. One, how many centuries will Kohli get by the end of his career? The second one is who will play the next World Test Championship final? This may be a little bit easier. And the last one, will India win the next T20 World Cup?
Well, the very nature of T20 is such that on a given day, even Afghanistan can beat Australia.
Yep.
So I think
They have a good team, Rashid Khan, and
it's no, but that's what I'm trying to say. There is no, see, in a football match, if you have got Real Madrid playing against, let's say, a state team in India, you can predict that the score will probably be 20-0. But the point in cricket is that it's a one ball game, and on a given day, uh, you know, 10 deliveries can destroy a team. So therefore, I am not chickening out of the question. In my heart, I would always want, of course, India to win. But the point is, T20 has got a lot closer than it was before. And all teams are, I mean, if you look at the way England is playing with the Baz theory, and the way Indians have also started hitting every delivery, and the world is watching what's happening with the Indian Premier League and all that. Just having an Indian Premier League doesn't guarantee that we'll be the best T20 team. So I think it's the most open T20 World Cup that I've seen. I can see six contenders to win the thing. There's no clear favorite at this point of time. It's really on that given day who plays the game. So I would be absolutely foolish to make a prediction. Kohli, how many centuries he scores is again is an Indian obsession question. We are obsessed with centuries. I would rather say that I have great faith in Kohli's abilities. He's going through a very lean patch. So there are two things to look at. One is, by law of averages, he should start getting back. But if law of averages doesn't catch up, that means Kohli is definitely on a decline. And this time comes in everybody's life. But when I've been watching him play, I don't see anything wrong with the way he's playing. He's just, on some particular day, you miss a stroke and the snick goes to the boundary. In his case, it goes to a fielder and he gets caught. It's just one of those things.
yeah.
I would be more interested to knowing that how many kind of innings is he going to play which are going to win matches for us. And I think the Kohli 2.0 or Kohli 3.0, whatever you may call it, yes, I'll coin it like that, is going to be a player who's going to win us enormous matches. At least that is my hope. Stranger things have happened in cricket, but he's just once in a lifetime kind of player. He's like that. And the other question you had was World Test Championship. I'm one thing I'm sure of is that we are not playing the finals.
We may, because Australia will come and we will make rubbish pitches and may win the series 4-0, whatever is required to sort of make the cut.
I think Pakistan, South Africa, and Australia always are the Pakistan and South Africa are the dark horses. we are all underestimating South Africa at this point. I know that South Africa
Yeah,
has all
the top of,
never
yeah.
never won a serious tournament, and they always called perennial chokers. But I'm saying that the way they defeated England yesterday,
Yep.
they are a mean side. They're pugnacious. They are a bit like Australians. And England has had a flash in the pan, but I don't see them sustaining long enough. We should have actually won that match against them. And that, because we lost, I'm not giving ourselves a chance in WTC because we lost it in the head. When you lose it in the head, it goes beyond cricketing abilities. I always take cricket as an example, even in business, because of the fact that there's so much of the temperament is important.
Yep. Yep. So I have taken more than the allotted time. And, if you have any closing remarks, we'll close with that.
I would only say that, I know you asked me a lot of questions which made me feel also a bit embarrassed because, we are all journeymen in this travel of life. So it is not, I may have traveled a little more than people, so I may have seen more forests and more ponds and more lakes and more lanes, met more people. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I know a lot more than the youngsters. And I think one quality that is required of you always is to remain grounded and keep learning. So, like somebody said, in the world, there are two kinds of people, one who are winners and one who are learners. So,
That's a great.
it's very important for everybody to remain grounded and learn. You can learn things from everybody. You can learn things watching your gardener. You can learn seeing somebody sweeping the floor. The question is, are you looking to learn?
Yep.
Are the doors and windows of your mind open all the time? And there is no age to stop learning. I'm not the first man in the world to say this.
No, sir, but it needs to be said time and again, and it's so so important. That's such a profound thought. But sir, as I said in the beginning, it's really an honor for me to be interacting with you, and I hope this interactive session, propel a lot of younger generation to aim high, and be successful and have a fulfilling career in life. Thanks a lot, sir, for taking the time out. And I took so much of your time.
Welcome.
Thank you for being patient and answering all the questions that I had.
Welcome. I'm sorry we couldn't do it earlier, but there's this Hindi में कहते हैं ना देर आए दुरुस्त आए. So
सर बिल्कुल आपने पूरा मैंने 1 घंटा मांगा था and you've given me more than that, so I'm really obliged.
it has been a pleasure talking to you, and I'm at a stage of my life where giving back is very, very rewarding.
So I'm going to stop the recording.